Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Census Population Studies. I'm David Rawnsley, Senior Data Technical Officer with the UK Data Service, based in JISC in Manchester. I've been involved with census data since about 1995 now, so this is going to be my fourth census coming up. Okay, so what is a census? Its main function is a count of the population. In the UK, we don't have any population registration systems, like a lot of other countries. So we have to count the population every 10 years to understand how many people there are and where they're living. When we count the population, we count people at the location that they are at on that day. And we ask questions concerning certain characteristics about the population and about the places that they live. We'll talk about the sort of characteristics covered in the census later. As the census covers almost everyone in the country, it's possible to have outputs available at very small geographical levels, which makes the census unique as a population study. The census's primary role is to inform public spending, such as the allocation of local government grants. And this could be done on the age distribution of areas, so we can decide where best to put schools or care homes, for example. It's also used as a benchmark for many other statistics. So when we talk about the census, actually we're talking about three censuses. We have three separate census agencies: the Office for National Statistics in England and Wales, the National Records of Scotland in Scotland, and the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency. There is a lot of coordination between the agencies. The majority of data is comparable. However, there are some differences to address the individual needs of each nation. For instance, Northern Ireland has different questions concerning religion. Scotland in 2011 didn't ask the question concerning what passports people hold. However, a lot of effort is put into make the outputs as harmonised as possible, and we at the UK Data Service have put in a lot of time to create a UK census output. So if you were around in 2011, this would have come through your door. We've been collecting a census since 1841, and it's normally self-completion. The household receives a form and the householder fill it in themselves. In 2011 it was post out and post back, but there was also an option to complete online, and about 15% of people in England and Wales filled it in online. I expect that figure to have gone up considerably by 2021/2022. We'll talk about that a bit later. By using post out, post back, as opposed to sending people out to deliver and collect forms, it meant that the census officers could focus their resources on areas that were hard to count, and so it sent field workers into those areas. Next time around in 2021/2022, there will be an online completion as the default method. I have another question now. Which of these topics do you think you will find in census outputs? Okay, so what we don't have in census at the moment is any question on sexuality. They did consider it for 2011, but they dropped that in the end. I believe it's going to be included in 2021/22. Income, there has never been a question on income. The question of sexuality is an issue because the form goes out to households, and it's up to the head of the household to fill in the form on behalf of everyone in the household. And sexuality is something that not everyone is willing to share. However, they have been exploring the idea, so we shall wait and see. Okay, so what questions were asked? You can split them down into three different areas: demography, household, and socioeconomic. Plenty of things there that we can look at finding out information about. It doesn't necessarily go into a lot of detail about these areas. There's always a tension between keeping the census form as short as possible versus obtaining the most detailed information. So establishing as complete a count as possible of the population, it's difficult. It's necessary to establish a good quality address register, and you would think that the Office for National Statistics, for instance, knows where every residence is in the UK, but that's not true. There were instances of people having built homes in their gardens and not telling the authorities about them, for instance, and there were families living in those that would have been impossible to count. Also, since forms were being posted out, we needed to get everyone's address. So there was a lot of cooperation with local authorities and other organisations, and a lot of field work went into getting as complete an address register as possible. They were looking to get a response rate from the forms at around about 94%. 94% of the population is an incredible number. You won't get anywhere near that with other surveys. A good response rate would have been 65%. However, they did get an incredible response rate in the end. In common with other surveys, they did get low response rates for young men, for those born overseas, and those that live alone. So it does matter if some groups aren't counted, as this will introduce a bias. So a coverage survey was done to see who they captured in the survey compared to the census, and then they estimated who they were missing. So the census data isn't just the people who were enumerated, but also estimations for people who were missed. There's a fair amount of detail on this on the ONS website, if you're interested. The Office for National Statistics promises confidentiality, promises that upfront on the forms. So respondents are assured that their data will remain confidential for 100 years. There's a legal obligation for the census agencies to not make that data available unless it is non-identifiable. So a lot of work goes into making sure that it is almost impossible to identify. Well, it should in theory be impossible to identify an individual from the census outputs for 100 years. But it does also have an implication of the type of data that we can release. So confidentiality is critical in deciding the sort of outputs that can be released. The level of detail is critical. You might be able to get lots of information about where someone lives, or you might be able to get lots of information about their socioeconomic characteristics, but you're not going to be able to get lots of detail about both. Say, for example, you knew someone aged 41 who was born in Norway. That wouldn't be enough to identify them. There are possibly lots of people in the UK who match these attributes. But if this data was available at a small geographical level, then that might be sufficient to identify them. If you're looking at, say, an output area, 50 households, you might be able to spot one person match those identifying attributes. So generally, there is a trade-off between the amount of geography and the amount of socioeconomic detail, but not both. Unless the data is available in a controlled way to people who have been given training and signed particular agreements. There's also a certain amount of data blurring and data obfuscation, so that they can release data, but the data isn't 100% accurate. So at very small levels, they might alter a 1 to a 3 or a 2 to a 1, for instance. So the type of outputs that came from the census, the ones supported by ourselves at the UK Data Service, we have microdata, which are samples of individual level data. We have aggregate data, which are data aggregated to areas. These are sometimes known as area statistics. We have flow data, which shows flows between one area and another and the characteristics of the people who are in the flow. And we have boundary data, which allows you to map the other census data. What we don't have are data which is longitudinal, but that is available through the call service. And we'll just go through these different types of data. So microdata, individual level data, looks very much like the sort of data you get if you conducted the census data yourself. Looking at this example, each row represents a single person, and each column is a variable. You won't get the full details to prevent identification. Country of birth might just be a couple of categories, for example. It depends on the topic combination that you've requested. It's only sample data, but there's about between 1% and 5% of the census. But as the census is very large, there's still a lot of data to look at. Why would you use this data? Well, it's very, very flexible, and you can make up your own tables, and you can combine characteristics to create new ones. But it is sample data, which means that results are estimates. Also, the geographical details is quite limited. I've got a number of different types of census microdata. Teaching files, which are open to anyone, you can download available for census officers. We've got safeguarded files, which are available from the UK data service. Controlled files, which you will have to apply to use. There's more information there at the web address on the bottom of the screen. We've got a summary there of the types of data and the level it's at, some of the variable classifications. So some of the data we have available, safeguarded regional data. You can look at this. If you go to the UK Data Service website, you can find that on there, and you can access it online. However, you will need to be registered to interrogate the data. Again, registration by an online form. Just an example of the sorts of things you will see in that microdata. The next sort of data is data about areas, aggregate data, aggregate statistics. These are what most people understand when we talk about census data. These counts of people, households, particular characteristics or combinations of characteristics in an area. Areas vary from nation down to area, about 50 to 75 households. Example of census aggregate data are number of females aged 30 to 34 who are married, live in private rented accommodation in the county of Devon. So this is what aggregate data looks like. You carve the country up into different areas, then count the number of people who have certain characteristics. So, for instance, this example might represent the number of females aged 30 to 34 who live in private rented accommodation in what that looks like, something like a lower level super-output area. And this is what it might look like in a table. And this is the sort of output you'd get if you downloaded the data from one of our interfaces. This shows that there are, for instance, 48 people aged 16 to 24 who identify as Muslim and live in Carlisle. And we deliver this aggregate data in two forms of interfaces. We'll show you those later. Census geography can be a little complicated, and UK census geography is probably the most complicated in the world. Don't know if that's something we should be proud of, but anyway, that's how it is. So we have data available, all these different levels, and the coverage of those. So we have data available from 1971 up to 2011, and in a couple of different interfaces, and we'll show you those now. Casweb is our oldest interface. It was first developed in 1998, so it's rather creaking at the edges now, but it's still going, and you still get data out of there very, very quickly. Because of the way we're funded, We get funded every so many years, and we sort of create a new interface, but we're not funded to put old data into new interfaces. So this is why we have a number of different interfaces. It's open to anyone. You don't have to be registered to use it. You just click the red Start Casweb button and go in there and select data. We do have some boundary data in there as well for 2001, and it's available in CSV, Excel, output formats. Infuse was designed for the 2001 census, and we've also got 2011 in there as well. And we've also got some integrated metadata in there about areas. You can start by going in either geography first or topic first. If you choose geography first, that will limit the detail of the topics. If you go and choose a detailed topic, that will limit the amount of geography that's available. But it guides you through that step by step. Again, that's open to everyone. You don't have to register to use that. We've also just put up a new interface called the Census Bulk Downloads, statistics.digitalresources.gist.ac.uk. We're putting more and more data into this. At the moment, it's only 2011 census data, but it's aggregate, flow, and boundaries. We are adding more as we go along. We're just putting the 2001 data in there at the moment. That is bulk download, so it's a complete table for the areas you're looking at. Again, open to everyone. So we're going to have a little question about one aspect of aggregate data in the 2011 census. So this is what percentage of people say they have no religion? Okay, the majority answer there is 39%, followed by, sorry, is 25 with 39%, and 28% of you say 35% of people have no religion. This is the output for the 2011 census for England and Wales. It was 25% said they had no religion. 0.31% said they were Jedi Knight, and 0.01% said they followed the religion of heavy metal. Religion is one of those questions where there's a write-in box, so you can put anything you like in there, and the list is very long, especially in Northern Ireland. It's an incredibly long list of different religious sects. Boundary data. We have boundary data from 1971 to 2011. We also have some historical boundary data as well. That's for all the nations in the UK. Most of these data are open to all. However, some of the older data is restricted to staff and students at UK academia. Variety of different GIS formats such as Shape, MapInfo, KLM. These are data delivered through easy download or the boundary data selector, which will allow you to subset the data. So you can select the boundary data for the area you want. We also have a tool called Thematic Mapper, where you can create choropleth maps without any prior GIS experience. Again, these are the areas that we have boundary data for. We're missing workplace zones from that list, but we do plan to put more geographies in there. This is the sort of output you can get from boundary data. First image is boundaries for regions in England, and in the last of those images, that's zoomed in so we can see wards and output areas in and around Merseyside. So it gets more interesting as you start to put census data into the maps. Here you can see percentage of people who were born in the UK and do not hold a passport. This data was formed from the topic combination of country of birth and passports held at local authority level, and we used corresponding 2011 local authority boundary data. The last sort of census data is flow data. So it's a special type of aggregate data where there's an origin and a destination. So there are two types, commuting and migration. Commuting data is the difference between place of residence and place of work, and migration is derived from the place of residence at census day compared with the usual residence in the previous year. So on the census form, there was a question asking respondents what their usual address was 1 year ago. We've got 1981 to 2011 census flow data, as well as some non-census flow data, such as migration data derived from NHS patient registers. 1981 to 2001 data is open access. Some of the 2011 data is open access, but some of it requires authentication. That's safeguarded data, and it's restricted to staff or students in UK universities, and also UK government staff, NHS staff, and Research Council staff. And census flow data can be accessed through an application called Wicked. So this is the sort of data you will see in Wicked. So we have the origin geography areas in the northeast, and destinations the same. So we're looking at method of travel to work for people who work and live in these areas, and it creates a matrix. So looking in this table, we're looking at the method of travel to work being trains. You can access all of the data we've just talked about through the UK Data Service website. This webinar just covers census data, but you can find all the data that we have through the website. To find the census data, you can hit the census data link under data types, just down here, and then you can get census data if that's what you wish to do, and then you can choose the sorts of data you're after. The use data page has further information, guides, and how to cite the data. The About UK Censuses contains the original data, such as the census forms and the census definitions. We also have a help page where we can provide help for you in a number of ways. Dedicated page for new users, list of FAQs, and by clicking on Get in Touch, you can send a query to our help desk, and we'll get back to you with an answer.